Hey guys! So today we will be finishing emails and memos. So this is emails and memos part 2. Today we will be looking at writing plans for information and procedure messages as well as smart email practices. All right, so let's get started with writing plans for information and procedure messages. All right, so the format for these guys is a subject line, an opening, a body, and a closing, just like everything else we've been working with. All right, so in the subject line, make sure that you summarize the content of the message. In the opening, you want to expand on the subject line. Remember to repeat the main idea here and to use the front loading like we talked about in the last video lecture, where you want your reader to know right away what you're going to be talking about. Make sure it's expressed in full sentences. If you remember from last time, the subject does not have to include articles and it does not have to be a full sentence or include punctuation. Your email or the message does. The body provides background. This is where you explain why you're writing to the person. You'll remember that we want to use the direct approach, not the indirect approach. Your email should not be starting with your explanations. And then, of course, your closing, where you will have an action request or summarize the message or present a closing thought. So you don't always call people to action, and in this case you might just say the information looks great, the report sounds good, contact me later, and things like that. So information and procedure messages distribute routine information. They describe procedures and they deliver instructions. So they typically flow downwards from management to the employees, and they relate to daily operations of an organization. In writing these messages, you have one primary function, and that is to convey your ideas so clearly that no further explanation will be necessary. You do not want to be sending emails or memos, messages, or requests to people and have them calling you up an hour later or knocking on your office door asking you, what are you talking about? You need to be so clear that there's no question in their mind, that they understand what you want. It's not about them agreeing with you, it's do they get it? A routine information message follows the writing plan that I showed above here, with an informative subject line, an opening that states the purpose directly, a body that organizes the information for maximum readability. The closing in an information message depends on what was discussed in it. So, if the message involves an action request, it should appear in the closing, not in the opening or not in the body, like we talked about before. Use front loading to tell the reader why you're writing to them, and close with your action requests. If no action is required, then the closing can summarize the message or offer some kind of closing thought. Procedural messages or procedure messages must be clear and readable. Making lists and achieving parallelism will help the reader comprehend what you say much quicker, which we talked about previously in other video lectures. Parallel language also makes you look more professional and efficient. If you missed the previous lecture or you don't remember, please go back and review Emails and Memos Part 1 or Language of Business Part 1 and Part 2, where we talked about parallelism and lists. All right, so making request messages. Well, the format for these guys is pretty much the exact same, surprise, surprise, nice and easy though, that we just looked at. So you always have a subject line which summarizes the request or the action that will be desired. The opening, which begins with the request or a brief statement that introduces it. The body, of course, providing background and details, maybe asking a question, and always using parallel form. And the closing is a request. You can use this to request action by a specific date or express appreciation. And make sure if you are calling people to action, if you're expressing, okay, people, you need to vote by this time, make sure you have a date included. Don't just say, get back to me. Tell them when. If you're asking people to do something, tell them when they need to have it done. That's very important. Business organizations require information to help managers and employees request information from each other and then respond to those requests. So knowing how to write requests and respond efficiently and effectively will save you time and make you look good. So here are a few things to keep in mind when writing these requests to make them efficient and effective. A functional subject line that uses a verb in noting the action desired allows the reader to know immediately what is being requested. The message should open with a polite command followed by a brief explanation. If you are requesting routine information or action with an organization, then the direct approach will work the best. Generally, this means asking for information or making the request without first providing elaborate explanations and justifications. Again, we're not really going for the indirect approach here. So readers are usually thinking, why me? Why am I receiving this? Readers can understand the explanation better when they know what you are requesting. So make sure that you open with that. In the body of the memo, explain and justify your request. When you must ask many questions, list them, but be careful to phrase them similarly. Again, parallelism is important. Questions can be highlighted with asterisks, but make sure you have a high skim value so that readers can understand and get the message quickly. If you are seeking answers to questions, you have 3 options for opening your message. You can start, number 1, ask the most important questions first, followed by an explanation and then including your other questions. Or you can use a polite command, but be aware that please answer the following questions regarding da 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 da. Or you can introduce the questions with a brief statement. Your answers to the following questions will help us. Da, da. So you have 3 options when you're seeking answers. Start with them, start with a polite request, or introduce the questions with a statement. Now, please remember to be courteous and friendly in the closing and include an end date, as I stated before, if possible, to promote a quick response. Providing an end date helps the reader know how to plan, and that way they will hopefully get back to you on time. Expressions such as do it whenever you can or complete it as soon as possible, they make little impression on procrastinators or people who are very busy. They'll probably forget. So it's always wise to provide a specific date for completion so that people can write it down or include it on their calendars or circle it on their calendar. Now, writing reply messages. Same format. Subject line, you need to summarize the main information from your reply. Oh, from your reply though. So remember, this is, okay, you've received something and you're writing back. So you got to summarize the main information from the reply. In your opening, you start directly by responding to the requests with a summary statement. In your body, you want to provide additional information and details in a readable format. And in your closing, add a concluding remark, make a summary, or offer further assistance to the receiver. So try to avoid the following long-winded or very wordy openings in replying to messages. In response to your message of the 15th, you don't need to do this. You're stating the obvious. Clearly you're responding because they sent you that message. Thank you for your memo of the 15th in which you stated. This suggests that the writer can think of nothing better to say. This is so not necessary. Don't bother. Don't bother with that. How about I have before me your memo of the 15th in which you Again, this unnecessarily identifies the location of the previous message And again, clearly you are replying to this person because of the message from the 15th. Or don't use pursuant to your request of the 15th. Again, this is like that old-fashioned language. Try to avoid this. And also be careful of, this is to inform you that, da, da, da. This is just delaying the point. Remember, we want to try to be direct in business messages. That includes the replies. So be careful of that. Remember that a lot of business correspondence reacts or responds to a previous message. So when you're replying to an email, a memo, or other documents, be sure to follow the 3-phase writing process that we've been reviewing. Analyze your purpose and your audience. Collect whatever information is going to be necessary. And organize your thoughts before you write. Also, I want to add to that, there should be really a 4th step, edit before you send it. Also, never a bad idea to make a brief outline of your points that you plan to cover. I wouldn't necessarily include the outline in the actual response, but you may want to have it with you just to make sure, like, you know, you make a little notepad and you stick it beside your computer, and as you're writing a reply, you can just go through and say, did I cover that? Did I cover that? Did I cover that? Not a bad idea. Okay. So instead of using these long, wordy, windy, drawn out beginnings, state directly what you want. Start by responding to the writer's request right away. If you agree to the request, then show your cheerful compliance with them immediately. Remember, readers like positive, positive, positive. So consider these openings. Yes, we will be glad to. This opening sends the message of approval by opening with yes. It's like they don't even have to read the rest of what you're saying because they know you agree with them. Again, hopefully they will read your whole message, but start directly. Show them that, yeah, we're with you. Or, here are the answers to the questions that you asked about. This sounds simple maybe, but it's honestly quite businesslike and it's professional. Don't be afraid to use that. There's also, you're right in seeking advice about. This opens with 2 words that every reader enjoys hearing. You are right. Well, it's 3 technically, I guess, but you're right. Now it's 2. So people like to be told they're correct. This opening is actually nice if you you don't want the person to feel that they shouldn't have asked you, and you don't want them to feel like smaller about themselves. So this is a good choice when you're trying to build somebody up and just say, yeah, it's okay, thank you. It's like reassurance. There's also, we're happy to assist you in. This shows that the writer's going to be helpful and they're probably of good nature. And as you requested, I am submitting, da, da, da. This gets right to the point. It's never bad to be direct again. And this will let the person know that you're taking action. So after a direct and emphatic opener, provide the information requested in a logical and in a coherent order. If you're answering a number of questions, arrange your answers in the order of the questions that they asked you. Don't jump around, okay? If they ask you 4 questions, even if they don't number them 1, 2, 3, 4, you don't have to number them in your reply, but at least follow how they asked them to you, okay? So, although the listing format requires more space than the paragraph format, listing can vastly improve the readability and the comprehension. You must admit, if you look here at my bulleted lists, that seems less daunting and easier to get through than when I show you the paragraphs. So consider that when you're writing as well. In providing additional data, use familiar words, short sentences, short paragraphs, and active voice verbs. So these are all things we've been over. Do you remember how long your sentences should be? Do you remember how long your paragraphs should be? If you're not sure, go back and review this from previous lectures. I'm not going to tell you. When alternatives exist, make this clear to your reader. If you're replying to a client, let's say, and you have options for them, make that clear. Don't just answer, yeah, we can do what you asked. If there are 3 or 4 other options, then tell them about that too. Consider using graphic highlighting techniques. We've been over this a few times now. If further action is required, then be specific in spelling it out. Don't walk around it. Don't use the indirect approach to get to this. You need to tell people you need to do this. Don't fart around, just tell them. Because if it's time sensitive, it's very important. What may be crystal clear to you, because you've been thinking about the problem, you wrote the message, is not always immediately apparent to the reader, who has limited time and probably limited interest in your message. So be as clear and to the point as you can. All right. So for the second part of the lecture tonight, we're going to be talking about smart email practices. So take the time before you're writing your emails to organize your thoughts. Compose carefully and be concerned with correct grammar and punctuation. Like I said earlier, never a bad idea to edit before you send something. The following pointers will help you get off to a good start when using email. So consider composing offline. Don't just open up your emails and start typing and replying to the person. Sometimes you need a moment to think, and this can help with the editing stage. Now, composing offline is good, especially for important messages when you should be thinking about how you're replying to them, what you're going to say, especially if there's something that might be emotional or upsets you, then you should probably leave it at least for a few hours, maybe a day, to compose a proper response. Then you can upload your message to your email and send it off. Make sure that you get the address right when you're replying to someone. Email addresses can sometimes be complex or long. They're often illogical, and they're always unforgiving if you send it to the wrong person. So if you even just omit one character or you misread a letter, the letter, let's say L for the number 1, we've all seen this. Okay, lowercase l. Can you tell if it's an L or a 1? Then your message will bounce or maybe even go to somebody else if that email address exists for somebody else. So a solution to this could be to use your electronic address book for people that you write to frequently. So every email has like an address book that you can keep their emails in. Something like a contact in your phone. Double check the address before you reply. Now this of course is when you're actually going through and typing out their email address manually and not just hitting reply, but it's always good to have it there in case you forget, or you have it written on your paper at home but you got to reply to this person from work. It'd be nice if it was in your electronic contacts book. Also, don't reply to a group of receivers when you intend to answer only one person. This can be such a pain in the butt. I am a cycle instructor for the YMCA, and often they send out group emails to all the cycle instructors or all of the fitness instructors for that particular Y. Often people reply to the messages by just hitting reply all, and I get tons of messages that are completely irrelevant to me because people aren't just replying to the coordinator of the program. So be careful and be aware of that. Also, it can be embarrassing if you're trying to reply to just one person, something sentimental or funny or whatever, and everybody gets it. So just be aware before you send things. Check who it's going to. Now, make sure that you avoid misleading subject lines. Make sure that your subject line is relevant and helpful. Again, we don't want people deleting it. We don't want it going into the spam folder. Generic tags such as high or important can cause your message to be not even looked at. And apply the top of screen test. So when readers open your message, look at the first thing that they'll see, the first screen. Will they see what's significant when they open their email? So like you right now can see the smart email practices and the bullet points. You can't see what's below that and on the next page, but that's what it means. When you open it up, what can they see right away? Alrighty. Moving on to tone, correctness, and content. So although email seems as casual as telephone calls sometimes, it's really not, because it produces a permanent record of everything. It's kind of like Facebook, where whatever you put out there, kind of permanent. So think very carefully about what you say, because even when things go into the delete or the trash folder, they're not deleted. So be careful. Here are a few tips to just help you with your content, tone, and correctness. So be concise. Don't burden the readers with unnecessary information. Remember that monitors are small and typefaces are often difficult to read, so organize tightly. Don't send anything that you don't want published. Again, just like Facebook, don't put that photo up there. Don't write that post. Be careful. It is a permanent record, even when it's deleted. So be very careful what you send over work emails. Don't use email to avoid contact with somebody. Email is inappropriate for breaking bad news or resolving arguments. So for example, it's very improper to fire somebody over email. It's also not a good way to deal with conflict with a supervisor or a coworker. And if there is any possibility of hurting somebody's feelings, then you need to call them or go and speak with them in person. Email is not the way to deal with that. You need to care about correctness. So people still judge you by your writing. Whether it's electronic or paper-based, people are still, unfortunately, judging all of us in our writing. So sloppy email messages with, missing apostrophes, bad spelling, zigzag writing, it makes the readers work too hard and they probably will just give up. And they might not even reply to you. Also, you need to care about your tone. We talked about this before. Your words and writing style will affect the reader. So avoid sounding curt or short with people, negative or domineering. You don't really want to be demanding anything of people. There is a soft way to demand something. So just be careful and resist humor and sarcastic comments. Even though we want to have fun and we want to joke around sometimes, we're not texting, no emoticons. And the problem is when you're writing, people don't get your tone, your facial expressions, your body language. They don't see you, so they don't know how you mean it. Just be careful of that as well, because you don't want to tick somebody off by accident. And netiquette. There are several rules of polite online interaction that are important to note. You should limit any tendency to send blank copies of something. So send copies only to the people who really need to see the message. It's unnecessary to document every business decision and action with an electronic paper trail. Please don't. Never send spam. Sending unsolicited advertisements or spam, either by fax or email, is actually illegal. So just be careful. Sometimes we accidentally forward something or whatever, but just do not do it on purpose. And consider using identifying labels. So when it's appropriate, add one of the following labels to the subject line. You can put action, as in actions required, FYI, RE, meaning re or in response to another message, or urgent, like please read this and respond immediately. You can also use capitals in your titles and other techniques that we've looked at. Don't forward things without permission. If you're receiving an email from somebody and it wasn't automatically sent to other people that you think should have seen the message, ask before you send it. And reduce your attachments, because attachments can carry viruses sometimes, and some receivers won't open them. Also, your email might crash if you try to upload too many things, or the person on the other end will not be able to open it. So consider including short attachments or smaller or fewer in your email messages. And if you have to send a big attachment, then maybe explain that in your message so that people will still open it. So when you're reading and replying to emails, the following tips can save you time and hopefully frustration when you're reading and answering your messages. So please make sure that you acknowledge receipt of the email or the message, whatever it may be. If you can't reply immediately, then reply to them and say something like, "Will respond Friday." At least they know you're not ignoring them. It's like when you text your friend and a whole day goes by and they didn't reply, and you call them the next day and ask them if they're angry at you. It can feel that way over email too. So just let them know that you got it and you will get back to them. Don't automatically return the sender's message. When replying, you can cut and paste out the relevant parts. Avoid irritating your recipients by returning the entire thread. I'm sure all of us have been involved in emails where there's like 20 some threads going through, and it's just so much to get through when you're trying to reply or find the relevant parts to talk about again. So just be careful. You can cut and paste things out. It will save you and the reader time later. So it's a good idea. Also, revise the subject line if the topic changes. You can keep replying back and forth, but if you've been talking for a whole week and you've talked about 6 different things and your subject line still says Happy New Year, change it. Also, provide a clear and complete first sentence. Avoid fragments such as "that's fine with me" or "that sounds good." Busy respondents will forget what is said earlier in the messages, so be sure to fill in the context with your perspective when you're responding. Don't respond when you're angry. As I said before, if you're receiving messages that are emotional or upset you, then you need time to cool off. This is a good time to implement composing offline and just calming down. It's okay if you have to wait a couple days to reply to something if you're angry. This is also maybe a good time if it's work related to just send that really quick email that says "will reply later this week" or "will reply by Friday" or something like this. That will give you time to compose your thoughts, and at least the other person knows you got it, and you won't be in an argument with them right away if an argument has to ensue. And last but not least, double check everything before you hit send. So have you included everything? If you're trying to send an attachment, make sure it's there. Try to avoid sending a second message because you forgot something or you didn't say something. Use spell check. I did this recently. I was trying to send a message to enroll in a course, and I spelled the name of the course wrong 3 times in the email that I sent because it was in another language, and I didn't check the title of the course before I sent it because I thought I knew. And when I went to go check the course a couple days later, I realized I had used the wrong title. So be very careful of your spelling. It's also a good idea to check your incoming messages before you send something, because if you're talking to somebody on a regular basis, then maybe they've sent you something else. And I do believe that is everything on emails and memos. So that's the end of the video lecture tonight, and I will see you in class. Bye.